Okay, guys, now we're talking about key issue 2. We're looking at interregional migration primarily. And so why are people and where are people migrating within a country? Okay, so the first thing, we're looking at the United States because of course we are, because we live in the United States. Okay, so the first, we look at 1790, everybody's hugging the coast. It makes sense, you know, they want to live as close as they can to the coast where more of their people are going to be coming from. Okay, if you left your family in search of a better life, you're not going to move into the middle of the country and force them to make that move as well. You're going to live as close as you can to the coast to try to make sure that they can get to you. Okay, then they start crossing the Appalachians. This is something that we're going to see later in this chapter as well. As soon as cities start to fill up, as soon as places start to fill up and people start feeling too cramped, they're going to start looking for other places. Then they start rushing for gold. Okay, this is taking place in California primarily. It's more or less just taking place in the West. And people are trying to, you know, make a quick buck just like they are today. You know, do you want to buy like thermogenics and stuff? And it's just like a total pyramid scheme. All of this stuff, people try to make a quick buck. The same thing was true 40 years ago, or during this 40 years, 1850 to 1890. Then people start filling in the Great Plains. Okay, we're seeing better agricultural practices. We're seeing people being able to farm better. And so this is another way that people can start making money more. And it's something that they feel comfortable doing now. Not everybody could be a farmer before. It was a lot of hard work. It still is, but now there's a lot more stuff. Then people started moving south. There was a lot more job opportunities and all that kind of stuff. The South developed a little bit later than the North as far as like industry and everything is concerned. And so now that it's developing quickly, there's a lot of jobs available. A lot of people decide that they're going to move south in order to gain those opportunities. Okay, so that's where we're seeing the most migration now, is people moving south. Then we're looking at Russia. And their population. So the funny thing is Russia, the people who first set everything up, okay, they wanted people to be right here in the northern tip of Russia, particularly near Siberia and such. And they tried to incentivize people to go there. They were like, hey, you know, this is like the coolest part of Russia. This is where everybody should be. The problem was, it wasn't just the coolest part of Russia, it was the coldest part of Russia, okay? That's the Arctic Ocean. Okay, it's fun to be on the coast of the Pacific or on the coast of the Atlantic. The coast of the Arctic, not so much fun. Freaking freezing. So yeah, people didn't want to live there. They all decided that they were going to live right over here. And this is good for several reasons. The first is it connects them to Europe. You know, if you're trying to be a businessman or something, or a businesswoman, you're going to want to be on that border so that you can like get quicker into Europe and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so a lot of people are located there, a lot of people on the southern border, but for the most part, people are located right over there on the western border. Then we've got the Trail of Tears. This is something we're going to talk about in class, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but this is like super crazy depressing. Basically, this is forced migration at its least fine, and we forced a bunch of Native American tribes to leave where they currently were so that we could basically take their land. We obviously being the European imperialists and all that kind of stuff. So not the best moment in American history, but we'll talk about it, and we'll see what's going on with all that stuff. Okay, so then we look at other migration in the large regions in the world. If you look at Canada, this is sort of the same thing as we were talking about with Russia. The first thing that a lot of people would jump to, especially as American-centric as we are, is would be like, oh man, look, they're all moving so that they can be close to America. Okay, that's not necessarily what's happening here. The main reason that people are moving is just because that's where the jobs are. And it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with America. But the main places that people are moving in Canada are Saskatchewan and Alberta. Then we look at China. We see a lot of rural to urban moving. So people are moving from the center of the country where there's predominantly farming jobs, and they're moving them onto the East Coast where they can get jobs in major cities and all that kind of stuff. It's similar to their birth policy. They just had like a massive migration policy. It's not like the United States where it's an immigration policy. It was a migration policy, and they were basically moving from the middle of the country out, and China wasn't a fan of that, and so they were limiting the number of people that could do that. But just like their birth policy, it's been repealed, and so that's why we're seeing all this migration now. Same thing is true in Brazil. A lot of people are moving basically out of the East Coast, and they're moving to the West Coast where the major cities are and all that kind of stuff. And we'll talk about that in class a little bit. So final thing, we're just going to talk about the three kinds of migration, okay? Or not the three kinds, but they're pretty similar. So we move from rural to urban areas. This is basically moving from a farm to a city. There's more people living in cities today than there are in rural areas for the first time in history, and so that's pretty important. Then we see people moving from urban to suburban areas. Okay, this is what we were talking about earlier, where once the cities get too full, people don't feel comfortable there anymore. They start moving away. Okay, this doesn't have anything to do with jobs. This has everything to do with like resources and stuff. Okay, it says basically I don't need to live 2 minutes away from where I work. I can live 30 minutes away from where I work, and because I have enough disposable income, I can make that drive every single day. And then we've got people moving from urban back to rural areas. This is this word counter-urbanization. Okay, and counter-urbanization is something that would make Malthus very happy, because basically what it does is people are moving away from urban areas back to rural areas and trying to basically live off the land again. Okay, it's not commercial agriculture. It's more of subsistence agriculture. It's more of providing just enough for yourself. And so depending on how you look at it, that can be a good or a bad thing. But we will talk about all of that in class on Wednesday or Thursday. So just make sure that you guys had those major points. You definitely want to have these three different kinds. As far as the migration between countries, it's not hugely important, but it's important to have some examples. And yeah, that's basically it.